Welcome back, thanks for tuning to our Reddit cheating stories. Where are you watching from? Drop comment and subscribe, thanks. Let's dive in. The scent of roasting chicken and simmering tension hung heavy in the air. Thanksgiving at the Henderson house was, as always, a carefully orchestrated performance. Martha Henderson, the matriarch, reigned supreme, her perfectly coiffed hair and iron grip controlling everything from the table settings to the conversation. Beside her sat Arthur, her husband, a man who'd long ago learned to nod and agree, a silent partner in Martha's meticulously crafted world. Then there were the children, Ethan, the golden boy, the lawyer with the perfect wife and the even more perfect children, and Daniel, the other one. Daniel, leaning back in his chair, trying to make himself as small as possible, knew his role in this family drama. He was the shadow to Ethan's sunshine, the screw-up, the disappointment. He worked as a mechanic, his hands perpetually stained with grease, a stark contrast to Ethan's pristine suits. He hadn't gone to university, hadn't married a doctor or some other equally impressive professional. He'd simply existed. The tension thickened as Martha launched into a monologue about Ethan's latest courtroom victory, complete with dramatic reenactments and exaggerated praise. Daniel, as usual, was ignored. He was used to it. He was the family's invisible man. He was about to excuse himself to help in the kitchen, a task Martha would never actually allow him to perform, when the bomb dropped. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice a carefully constructed blend of concern and authority, "there's something we need to discuss." He glanced at Daniel, a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like guilt in his eyes. Martha beamed, assuming this was about Ethan's upcoming promotion. "Of course, darling. Anything for my successful son." Ethan cleared his throat. "It's about the inheritance. Grandma Henderson's jewelry box." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Grandma Henderson's jewelry box. A dusty, velvet-lined box filled with antique trinkets and one particularly valuable diamond necklace, the centerpiece of which was a large, pear-shaped diamond known as the Henderson tear. It had been a source of family lore and endless squabbles for as long as Daniel could remember. Grandma had left it to be equally divided among the grandchildren, eventually. "It's missing," Ethan stated, his voice flat. "And, well, all fingers are pointing to Daniel." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. He sputtered, "What? That's insane. Ethan, you know I wouldn't." Martha's perfectly painted lips thinned into a disapproving line. "Daniel, you've always been impulsive. And you know how much that necklace meant to me. To all of us." Arthur, surprisingly, spoke up. "Now, Martha, let's not jump to conclusions. Daniel, have you perhaps seen it? Maybe moved it somewhere?" Daniel shook his head frantically. "I haven't seen it. I haven't even been near that thing in years. You know I prefer working with engines, not jewelry." But no one was listening. Ethan presented his evidence, circumstantial, flimsy, based purely on Daniel's past, troublemaking, a speeding ticket when he was 18 and a minor fender bender 5 years ago. Martha, fueled by years of preconceived notions and a deep-seated preference for Ethan, was already convinced. The Thanksgiving dinner dissolved into a shouting match. Daniel, overwhelmed and utterly betrayed, was accused, judged, and condemned without a shred of real proof. He pleaded, he protested, he begged them to believe him. But they wouldn't. Finally, Martha delivered the final blow. "Daniel, until you return the jewelry box, you are no longer welcome in this house. You are no longer part of this family." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes. Not because of the necklace, he didn't care about the stupid necklace. But because of the utter and complete lack of faith, the blind favoritism, the casual cruelty. He had been judged and found guilty. He walked out, slamming the door behind him, the sound echoing the shattering of his family. The weeks that followed were a blur of hurt and anger. Daniel threw himself into his work at the garage, the smell of motor oil and the roar of engines a temporary balm to his wounded spirit. He lived in a small, cluttered apartment above the garage, a space he'd always considered temporary. Now, it felt like his prison. He lost contact with everyone in his family. He didn't call, and they certainly didn't call him. The silence was deafening. His phone felt heavy in his hand, the urge to reach out, to plead his case again, warring with the bitter taste of betrayal. He confided in his boss, Mr. Kowalski, a gruff but kind man who'd seen it all in his 60-odd years. Mr. Kowalski listened patiently, offering the occasional grunt of sympathy. "Family, eh?" Mr. Kowalski said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Can't pick, can you? Sometimes, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, kid. You gotta find your own family, the people who see you for who you are, not who they want you to be." Daniel took Mr. Kowalski's words to heart. He started spending more time with his friends from the garage, a motley crew of mechanics, racers, and general gearheads. They weren't fancy, they weren't sophisticated, but they were loyal and honest. They accepted him as he was, grease-stained hands and all. He also started focusing on his passion, restoring classic cars. He'd always had a knack for it, a deep understanding of the mechanics and an eye for detail. He bought a beat-up 1967 Mustang, a project he poured his heart and soul into. He spent hours in the garage, sanding, welding, and rebuilding, the rhythmic clang of metal against metal, a meditative rhythm that soothed his frayed nerves. Slowly, painstakingly, Daniel began to rebuild his life. He was still angry, still hurt, but he was also resilient. He was determined to prove them wrong, not for them, but for himself. He would show them that he was more than just the family screw-up, more than the shadow to Ethan's golden light. 5 years passed. Daniel had made a name for himself in the local car restoration scene. His work was meticulous, his passion infectious. He even started his own small business, Daniel's Classics, a haven for classic car enthusiasts. He wasn't rich, but he was happy. He had built a life he was proud of, a life that was authentically his. Then, the hurricane hit. Hurricane Zephyr, a monstrous storm, ripped through the Florida coastline, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. News reports showed flooded streets, collapsed buildings, and widespread devastation. Daniel watched in horror, knowing that his parents lived in a small coastal town. He tried calling them, but the lines were down. He tried Ethan, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Panic clawed at his throat. Despite everything, they were still his family. Against his better judgment, against the years of hurt and resentment, he packed his truck with supplies, water, food, blankets, a generator, and headed south. The drive was harrowing. Roads were blocked, debris littered the landscape, and the air hung heavy with the smell of salt and decaying vegetation. As he got closer to his parents' town, the devastation became even more apparent. Homes were reduced to rubble, boats were tossed ashore like toys, and the screams of the wind still echoed in his ears. Finally, he reached his parents' house. Or, what was left of it. The roof was gone, the walls were crumbling, and the yard was a wasteland of splintered wood and twisted metal. He called out, his voice hoarse, "Mom." "Dad." A weak voice answered. "Daniel." He followed the sound to what was once the living room, now a pile of debris. He found his mother huddled under a tattered blanket, her face pale and drawn. His father lay beside her, his leg trapped under a fallen beam. "Daniel. Thank God you're here." Martha cried, her voice trembling. "Dad. What happened?" Daniel asked, his heart pounding in his chest. "The storm, it was too strong," Arthur groaned. "We tried to evacuate, but the roads were flooded. The house, it just collapsed around us." Daniel quickly assessed the situation. His father's leg was badly injured, and both his parents were dehydrated and in shock. He carefully freed his father's leg, using a piece of salvaged wood as a lever. Then, he gave them water and wrapped them in blankets. "Where's Ethan?" he asked, his voice strained. Martha's face crumpled. He and his family evacuated to Atlanta days ago. He said he couldn't get us out in time. He said it was too dangerous." The bitterness rose in Daniel's throat. Ethan, the golden boy, had abandoned his parents in their time of need. And Daniel, the screw-up, the outcast, was the one who had come to their rescue. Daniel got his parents to a temporary shelter set up in a local school. The conditions were basic, but they were safe and had access to medical care. He spent the next few days helping them navigate the bureaucracy of insurance claims, FEMA applications, and temporary housing. He also began the arduous task of clearing the debris from their property. He worked tirelessly, his hands blistered and bleeding, driven by a sense of duty and a flicker of something that might have been forgiveness. One afternoon, as he was hauling away a pile of twisted metal, he heard a familiar voice. Daniel. He turned to see Ethan standing there, looking pale and uncomfortable in a crisp, clean shirt. Ethan, Daniel said, his voice flat. I came as soon as I could, Ethan stammered. The roads were, you know. Daniel said nothing. He just stared at his brother, the years of resentment simmering beneath the surface. Mom and Dad, how are they? Ethan asked, avoiding Daniel's gaze. They're alive, Daniel said. Thanks to me. Where were you, Ethan? When the storm hit, when they needed you. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I had my own family to worry about. I couldn't risk their safety. And Mom and Dad weren't your family? Daniel asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. Ethan didn't answer. He knew he had failed. He had prioritized his own comfort and security over the well-being of his parents. Look, Daniel, Ethan said, finally meeting his brother's eyes. I know I messed up. I know I haven't been a good brother. But I need your help. Daniel raised an eyebrow. My help? After all these years? After you accused me of stealing Grandma's necklace? After you and Mom disowned me? I know, Ethan said, his voice pleading. I was wrong. We were wrong. We were blinded by our own prejudices. But Mom and Dad need help rebuilding their lives. And I don't know how. Daniel hesitated. He had every right to turn his back on Ethan, to let him flounder in his own guilt and incompetence. But he looked at his brother's face, saw the genuine remorse in his eyes, and something shifted within him. What kind of help do you need? Daniel asked, his voice grudging. Everything, Ethan admitted. I don't know anything about construction, about insurance claims, about any of this. You've always been good with your hands, good at fixing things. You're the only one who can help them. Daniel thought for a moment. He still felt the sting of the past, the injustice of the accusations, the pain of the rejection. But he also saw the devastation of the hurricane, the fragility of his parents, and the genuine need in his brother's eyes. All right, Daniel said, finally. I'll help. But on my terms. The next few months were a crash course in family dynamics. Daniel, Ethan, and their parents were forced to live and work together in close quarters, navigating the wreckage of their past and the challenges of their present. Daniel took the lead on the rebuilding efforts. He organized volunteers, secured donations, and oversaw the construction. Ethan, to his credit, tried to help, although his lack of practical skills was often more of a hindrance than a help. Martha, stripped of her perfect facade, was a shadow of her former self. She was humbled by the experience, forced to confront the consequences of her own biases and prejudices. Arthur, ever the peacemaker, tried to mediate between his sons, urging them to forgive each other and move forward. Slowly, brick by brick, they began to rebuild their lives. They rebuilt the house, stronger and more resilient than before. They rebuilt their relationships, one conversation, one shared meal, one act of kindness at a time. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and moments of intense frustration. But there were also moments of genuine connection, of shared laughter, and of a growing understanding. One evening, as they were sitting on the porch of the newly rebuilt house, watching the sunset, Martha turned to Daniel. Daniel, she said, her voice trembling, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. I let my own prejudices blind me. You are a good man, a good son. And I am so proud of you. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes. It was the apology he had waited years to hear, and it meant more than he could say. Thank you, Mom, he said, his voice choked with emotion. Ethan put his hand on Daniel's shoulder. I'm sorry too, Daniel. I was jealous of you, of your independence, of your ability to fix things. I let my own insecurities get in the way. You're a better man than I am. Daniel looked at his brother, saw the sincerity in his eyes, and felt the last vestiges of resentment melt away. We all make mistakes, Ethan, he said. The important thing is that we learn from them. A few weeks later, as they were sorting through some salvaged items from the old house, Daniel stumbled upon a box labeled, Grandma Henderson's Things. He opened it and found, nestled among old photographs and trinkets, the velvet-lined jewelry box. He opened the box, his heart pounding in his chest. And there it was, the Henderson necklace, gleaming in the afternoon sun. He stared at it, dumbfounded. How could it have been here all along? Why hadn't anyone found it before? He called his parents and Ethan to the porch. He showed them the necklace, explaining where he had found it. Martha gasped. But I searched everywhere for that necklace. I was sure Daniel had taken it. I know, Mom, Daniel said gently. But I didn't. It was here all along. Ethan looked sheepish. I guess I wasn't as thorough in my investigation as I thought. Daniel frowned. Something didn't add up. Why would the necklace be hidden away in a box like this? He examined the box more closely. He noticed a small, handwritten note tucked inside the lid. He unfolded it and began to read. The note was from Grandma Henderson. It was addressed to Martha. My dearest Martha, the note read. I know how much you want the Henderson necklace. You've always been so envious of it. So, I'm leaving it to you, with a condition. You must learn to appreciate your sons equally. You must learn to see the good in both of them. If you cannot do this, then the necklace will remain hidden, a reminder of your own failings. Daniel looked up at his mother, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and understanding. Martha's face was ashen. She stammered, I don't know what to say. Grandma knew, Daniel said softly. She knew about your favoritism. She knew about the way you treated me. And she hid the necklace to force you to change. Martha broke down in tears. I was so foolish, she sobbed. I let my own vanity and my own prejudices blind me. I almost destroyed my family. Daniel went to his mother and put his arms around her. It's okay, Mom, he said. You can't change the past, but you can change the future. Ethan joined them, and they all stood there, huddled together, the weight of the past finally lifted from their shoulders. The discovery of the necklace brought a sense of closure to the Henderson family. It was a reminder of the mistakes they had made, but also of the lessons they had learned. Martha made a conscious effort to treat Daniel and Ethan equally. She celebrated their successes, supported them through their challenges, and learned to appreciate them for who they were, not for who she wanted them to be. Ethan, humbled by the experience, became a more compassionate and understanding brother. He learned to value Daniel's skills and his resilience, and he finally saw him as an equal. Daniel, in turn, forgave his family for their past transgressions. He realized that they were all flawed, all capable of making mistakes. But he also knew that they were capable of love, of growth, and of redemption. He continued to run Daniel's Classics, his passion for restoring cars undiminished. He also became more involved in his community, using his skills to help others in need. The Henderson family never fully recovered from the hurricane, but they emerged from the wreckage stronger and more united than before. They had learned the true meaning of family, the importance of forgiveness, and the power of unconditional love. And the Henderson necklace. It remained in the jewelry box, a reminder of the journey they had taken, the lessons they had learned, and the new beginning they had found. It was no longer a symbol of greed and envy, but a symbol of hope, of healing, and of the enduring power of family. Life settled into a new rhythm for the Hendersons. The rebuilt house became a symbol of their renewed connection. Thanksgiving, once a source of anxiety, was now a genuine celebration, filled with laughter, shared stories, and a deep sense of gratitude. Daniel's business thrived. His reputation for quality and integrity spread, and Daniel's Classics became a destination for car enthusiasts from all over the region. He even started mentoring young mechanics, passing on his knowledge and passion to the next generation. Ethan, inspired by Daniel's resilience and his commitment to helping others, began volunteering at a local legal aid clinic. He used his legal skills to assist low-income families, providing them with access to justice and a voice in the legal system. He discovered a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life, a feeling of fulfillment that transcended the pursuit of wealth and status. Martha, no longer the rigid matriarch, blossomed into a loving and supportive grandmother. She spent hours playing with her grandchildren, reading them stories, and teaching them about the importance of family. She also became an advocate for disaster preparedness, sharing her experience with others and urging them to take steps to protect themselves and their loved ones. One sunny afternoon, Daniel was working in his garage, polishing the chrome bumper of a classic Corvette. He heard a familiar voice call out his name. He looked up to see Sarah, a woman he had met at a car show a few years earlier. Sarah was a fellow car enthusiast, a talented photographer, and a kind and compassionate soul. "Hey, Daniel," Sarah said, her eyes sparkling. "I was in the neighborhood, and I thought I'd stop by and see what you're working on." "Hey, Sarah," Daniel said, a smile spreading across his face. "It's good to see you. I'm just finishing up this vet. What do you think?" Sarah walked around the car, admiring its sleek lines and its gleaming finish. "It's beautiful, Daniel," she said. "You have a real gift." Daniel blushed. "Thanks, Sarah. That means a lot coming from you." They talked for a while about cars, about photography, and about life in general. As the afternoon wore on, Daniel realized that he was falling in love with Sarah. He loved her passion, her intelligence, her sense of humor, and her kind heart. Finally, he took a deep breath and asked, "Sarah, would you like to go out to dinner with me sometime?" Sarah smiled. "I'd love to, Daniel," she said. Their first date was magical. They talked for hours, sharing their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. They discovered that they had a lot in common, including a love of classic cars, a passion for helping others, and a deep appreciation for family. Over the next few months, their relationship blossomed. They spent weekends exploring the countryside, attending car shows, and volunteering at local charities. They supported each other's dreams, celebrated each other's successes, and comforted each other through their challenges. One evening, as they were sitting on the beach, watching the sunset, Daniel took Sarah's hand in his. "Sarah," he said, his voice trembling, "I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Daniel," she said. "I will marry you." They embraced, their hearts overflowing with love and happiness. A few months later, Daniel and Sarah were married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by their family and friends. Martha and Arthur beamed with pride as they watched their son exchange vows with the woman of his dreams. Ethan served as the best man, offering a heartfelt toast to the happy couple. As Daniel looked at Sarah, standing beside him in her beautiful wedding gown, he realized how far he had come. He had overcome adversity, forgiven his family, and found true love. He had built a life that was filled with purpose, with passion, and with joy. He knew that the road ahead would not always be easy. There would be challenges, there would be setbacks, and there would be moments of doubt. But he also knew that he was not alone. He had Sarah by his side, he had his family's love and support, and he had the strength and resilience to face whatever the future might hold. As he and Sarah walked hand in hand into their new life together, Daniel knew that he had finally found his place in the world. He was no longer the shadow, the screw-up, the outcast. He was Daniel Henderson, a man who had overcome adversity and built a life that was truly his own. He was a husband, a son, a brother, and a friend. He was a mechanic, a restorer, and a mentor. He was a survivor, a lover, and a dreamer. He was, simply, a man who had learned to appreciate the beauty and the fragility of life, and who was determined to live it to the fullest. And as the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in a blaze of color, Daniel knew that his new beginning was just the start of an incredible journey. Years passed, and the Henderson family continued to grow and thrive. Daniel and Sarah had 2 children, a son named Arthur, after Daniel's father, and a daughter named Martha, after his mother. Ethan and his wife had another child, bringing even more joy and laughter into the family gatherings. The memory of Hurricane Zephyr remained a powerful reminder of the importance of family, of forgiveness, and of community. The Hendersons became active volunteers in disaster relief efforts, helping others rebuild their lives after storms and other tragedies. Daniel's business continued to flourish, and Daniel's Classics became a local landmark. He expanded the garage, hiring more mechanics and offering a wider range of services. He also started a scholarship program for underprivileged students who were interested in pursuing careers in automotive technology. Ethan, inspired by his brother's example, became a champion for social justice. He used his legal skills to fight for the rights of the marginalized and the vulnerable, advocating for policies that would create a more equitable and just society. Martha, now a beloved great-grandmother, continued to spread her wisdom and her love to all those around her. She wrote a memoir about her life, sharing her experiences with others and urging them to learn from her mistakes. One day, Daniel was working in his garage, teaching his son Arthur how to change a tire. He looked up to see his mother standing in the doorway, a wistful smile on her face. "Daniel," she said, "I was just thinking about Grandma Henderson and the necklace." Daniel smiled. "Me too, Mom. It's funny how something that caused so much pain and conflict could end up bringing us all closer together." Martha nodded. "It's a reminder that even the darkest clouds can have a silver lining. And that sometimes, the greatest blessings come from the most unexpected places." Daniel looked at his son, who was now diligently tightening the lug nuts on the tire. He thought about his brother, his mother, his wife, his children, and all the people who had touched his life along the way. He realized that he had been given a second chance, a chance to rebuild his life, to forgive his family, and to create a legacy of love and compassion. And as he looked out at the setting sun, casting a warm glow over his garage, his family, and his life, Daniel knew that he had finally found his true calling. He was Daniel Henderson, a man who had learned to embrace the storms of life and to find the beauty in the aftermath. He was a man who had transformed adversity into opportunity, and who had created a life that was filled with purpose, with passion, and with joy. He was, simply, a man who had learned to live, to love, and to leave the world a better place than he had found it. And that, he knew, was a legacy worth leaving behind. That's it for today's story. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on more amazing content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.